I see you shiver with anticipation.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on buckeyegrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
It's Friday. It's the end of August 30th to be exact. We are one day away from Saturday. All this means, if you're not into word problems, if you weren't into problem solving in high school, this means it's college football season. We are here one day away from the start of the 2019 Ohio State football season. Good Friday, everybody. I am your host, Kyle Lamb. I am pumped up. I'm ready for college football. I'm making a day of it. Saturday, I'm just going to sit around the TV. I'm going to be as lazy as I can be because I want to, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to watch college football from start to finish, and nobody is going to tell me that I can't. This is the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. We are here thanks to BuckeyeGrove.com and also our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. So please go to jfqlending.com, check them out, send them an email, contact them, tell them Kyle over at Unscripted Ohio sent you, and get something done. Whether it's a new house, new mortgage, refinancing, whatever, just get it done. We are also here with support from GoBus. With over 40 stops across Ohio at popular destinations like the Hocking Hills, Mohican State Park, and Ohio's big cities, you should go to ridegobus.com, book your travel plans today, or give them a call, 1-888-95-GO-BUS. So here's the deal, everybody. Noon tomorrow, kickoff, Ohio State, Florida Atlantic. That is on Fox if you are not heading over to Ohio Stadium. It'll be a nationally televised game. Ohio State is a 4-touchdown favorite, but we have seen stranger things happen. Remember, think back to the 2007 season. I know this is a little bit different situation, but Michigan was upset in the Big Ten Network debut against then FCS Appalachian State. Now, granted, I know you don't care about this qualifier, but let's be fair. That was a very good FCS program in Appalachian State, and they become a pretty good FBS program. You know, they've been really good since they moved up a level, but they were a good FCS program. But nonetheless, Michigan did lose. I haven't looked at what the spread for that game was, but I imagine it's probably 3 or 4 touchdowns, similar to the range that Ohio State is favored over a pretty good FAU team. 4 touchdowns is a lot, but we've seen crazier things happen. I mean, UNLV last year, or 2 years ago, was like a 45-point favorite over FCS Howard, and they lost the game. So stranger things have happened, but if all goes as planned, Ohio State should win this game handily. So I've got a lot coming up here. So here in a little bit, a few minutes actually, I'm going to have Kevin Noon, publisher of Buckeye Grove, Kirk Barton, former captain, also an analyst for Buckeye Grove, and Ross Bolton, our football analyst for Buckeye Grove. Sensing a theme there, sensing a little bit of consistency there. That is because all three guys are at BuckeyeGrove.com. Very excited to have them along. We're going to preview this game and kind of look ahead to the season as a whole. I've also got Chris Drew. He is the new host of the Dog Days podcast here on the Unscripted Ohio Network. We'll be talking later about the Browns and what's coming up on the Browns podcast here. Dog Days debuting on Tuesday. That'll be every Tuesday here on Unscripted Ohio. So if you are a Cleveland Browns fan, I'm really excited about this. I think if you are a Browns fan, you are going to enjoy Chris's show. He does a great job. He is a radio guy for WAKR in Akron. Young guy, very energetic, very knowledgeable about the Browns. Give him a listen if you're a Cleveland Browns fan. I think you're going to enjoy the show. He'll be on here later on. We'll talk about the Browns, what's coming up in the show, and a little bit of Buckeyes as well. So I'm very excited about that. So Kevin, Kirk, and Ross coming up in a few minutes. Chris coming up here towards the end of the show. But here's what I'm looking at. So, Ohio State and FAU tomorrow. First and foremost, we all are wanting to see the same thing. We want to see what's going to happen with Justin Fields. That's at the forefront, top everybody's minds. How will Justin Fields perform in his debut? I also want to see the running game. You know, I'm curious about how the offensive line does. On paper, it looks like it's going to be stellar. I think the run blocking is going to be much improved from last year. I think J.K. Dobbins is going to be back on track a little bit. He did not have the greatest year. He's acknowledged that. Can the Ohio State run game take it to another level? They're going to need to a little bit. I think last year maybe they got hurt by the fact they passed it so well. I don't expect Justin Fields to pass it as well as Dwayne Haskins. He's got that potential, but it's not going to happen, especially right out of the gate. So Ohio State needs to be more balanced. Will Ryan Day seek to bring that 50-50 balance that Urban Meyer always strived for? I tend to think he will. I don't think he's going to be as fanatical about it, but we also know that Urban strived for it, but he wasn't perfect. He didn't always get it. I think that they need it this year, especially in the early going. They've got to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage, control the line of scrimmage. They didn't do that in the first half of last year. They did it better as the season went along. I think this offensive line is going to be much improved up front, but I want to see a return to that run game. In a 3rd and 1 and a 4th and 1, they have got to be able to move bodies off the line and pick up a first down. They didn't do that last year. We'll see if they can. Now, by the same token, on the other side of things, for pass protection, will they block and keep Justin Fields upright in the pocket as much as they did last year? That's what I'm interested to see, because last year they were really, really good at that. I don't expect that kind of efficiency from the pass protection, but if they can get better run blocking and just, you know, if they can just be efficient and consistent with the pass blocking, then I think those two things will go together. On the defensive side of the ball, two things. I want to see what kind of depth Ohio State has at defensive end, especially with Jonathan Cooper banged up. We know Chase Young has the chance to be a monster. Can Tyler Friday, Tyreek Smith, some of these guys at end, can they step up and give quality depth for Ohio State at defensive end? I really like the interior defensive line for Ohio State. I think that's going to be as deep as anybody in the country. And while they may not have any of those big-time disruptive forces that Ohio State has had in the middle in the past, they don't have Draymond Jones any longer. They don't have a Dan Wilkinson. Guys like that are missing. But what they do have is they have 5, 6, maybe 7 guys that I think could be very productive and play a lot and get it some time in the rotation. So they're going to rotate bodies on the defensive line. Where it's really at for me, though, of course, is the linebackers. You know, this is a much maligned group from last year. We all know that they didn't perform. Tuff Borland was coming off of major Achilles surgery. That probably slowed him down a little bit. They missed a lot of tackles. They weren't in position. That, for me, is the key to the Ohio State defense, because I think the defensive backfield, the secondary, looks like it has a chance to be as good as anyone in the country. We know the interior defensive line is going to be really good. Chase Young is a potential top 5 draft pick in this year's draft if he, lives up to his potential. So I'm looking for the linebackers on the defensive side of the ball. I'm looking for the run game, both the offensive line and J.K. Dobbins on the offensive side of the ball. Those are the things that I'm interested in. We may not see it tomorrow if Ohio State wins by 4, 5, 6 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns, who knows. That'll be kind of misleading. I'm not sure it'll tell us a lot. We got to remember not to jump to conclusions after one game. So we may not see it all tomorrow, but sometime here in these first few weeks of the season, especially before they go to Lincoln or especially when they go to Lincoln to face Nebraska, I think we're going to have to see if those things come together for this Ohio State team. But I'm really excited. So those are the things that I am looking for tomorrow. Make sure you tweet at me at KYLam8. Love to hear your thoughts and analysis and your predictions on this game. I'm going to make my prediction. I think Ohio State wins this going away. I'm going to say 42-10. That's my prediction. Ohio State beats FAU on Saturday. But let's turn it over now. Let's get Kevin and Kirk and Ross in here, and we'll talk some more Ohio State football.
Ross Fulton is here with his whiteboard to break down what the Buckeyes and their opponents are doing on the field. Can't see the whiteboard? Close your eyes and imagine really hard. It's time to go inside the X's and O's with Ross.
Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
All right, I'm here with Ross Fulton, Kevin Noon, and Kirk Barton, all of BuckeyeGrove.com. We are going to preview the game on Saturday and the season as a whole. Kevin, let's start with you. It's pretty cool that we were able to get this together with the power of technology. Made our lives a little easier. It wasn't without a hitch, but I was glad to get everybody together.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology is our friend, or so they say. But I had full faith you'd be able to figure it out. I mean, it's above my pay grade.
Kirk, long time no speak, but here we are back on the podcast. It's been a long summer, my man.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back and ready for the game to kick off. I'm going to a high school game tonight, and looking forward to about 5 straight days of football.
And Ross, you were you were able to fit us in your schedule. I know you're very, very busy, but you're on the go, and we're still able to do this. So thanks for joining us, Ross.
Glad we could make it happen.
What are you looking forward to seeing on Saturday? With maybe it's Ohio State's new coaches on defense, the scheme, personnel. What is it that stands out that you want to see from Ohio State this Saturday?
Yeah, the X and O's guy in me is obviously probably the most interested in seeing exactly what the new defense looks like. I feel like they've been coy, perhaps unnecessarily so, exactly about what they're going to be doing, but that has led, I guess, to all of us guessing. And so we'll obviously see a lot more on Saturday. I'm also interested to see offensively sort of where they are, particularly with how much they're going to rely on Justin Fields' legs and the running game in general, vis-a-vis where they are as a team in the past game.
Kevin, what is it, with Ohio State? Ryan Day has mentioned this week that, FAU has, an interesting scheme offensively. They're going to really put Ohio State to the test. Do you think this is going to be, even despite the talent discrepancy, do you think this will be a good test for the Ohio State defense to see where they have come from in the offseason and where they are right now with scheme, personnel, and just reading and reacting and making the right plays?
Yeah, I think any chance that you get to go against another team is a good test. I mean, Oregon State put 31 up on them in the season opener last year, and Oregon State wasn't worth a darn. I mean, you saw time and time again, it wasn't necessarily even the great backs and great playmakers that were making plays against the Ohio State defense. I mean, they made stars out of a lot of guys. It wasn't Isaiah Bowser for Northwestern that had the big touchdown run. It was John Moten that had it. So, yeah, they'll get tested. I don't think that Florida Atlantic really has a lot of bullets in the chamber in terms of playmakers. They're not nearly as explosive as they were last year. A lot of their guys have gone on to the next level or are waiting for the XFL to start in 2020. But with that being said, I think it'll be a good opportunity for this defense to go against a team in a different color jersey that's not running an Ohio State system against them.
Kirk, do you think that is the kind of leadership that you saw? Do you expect guys to step up and kind of take ownership of what happened on defense last year? And do you think that that's been a big topic of discussion in the offseason? And are they out, to prove something here, not only Saturday, but the season as a whole?
I mean, I think if you've ever played and been in Columbus, Ohio, when your side of the ball isn't particularly efficient, I guess you could say. I'd say that, guys like Chase Young and, Tough Borland, they've heard it all offseason. And, Tough, I always feel bad for Tough because he came off an Achilles and, he shouldn't have been playing, but he, gutted it out. And every time people ran past him, like, oh, look how slow he is. I was like, he just tore his Achilles 6 months ago. It's like, I mean, most guys are out for a year if they ever can get back from that. But, I'm just excited for these guys to, hopefully put on a good show this weekend and kind of get last year behind us because, our defense was so bad last year that people still can't talk about it and they're skeptical if the Bulls are really back, even though guys are talking about it. But I had faith, having one voice in Greg Madison running the defense and simplicity. I just, when you have talent like we do, you just got to let those guys play and don't don't screw it up.
You know, Ross, it's kind of funny because all of the discussion in the offseason, especially when Al Washington and Greg Madison were first hired from Michigan, there was a lot of anticipation that maybe Taraja Mitchell would wind up winning the inside linebacker job, and there'd be changes on the linebacking core. But here we are. The new staff has wound up, picking the same guys, at least going into the first game, that the old staff picked. What does that tell you? And does it mean that maybe we should have been looking at a scheme issue, or at very least, how they interacted with the personnel last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's one big caveat to that is the new bullet position. So whereas, I mean, my personal opinion is we'll see on Saturday, but I think you'll see them in a 4-2-5 essentially 90+% of the time, which is a pretty big difference than having three linebackers on the field. That said, the defense last year, obviously, when you just look at the bottom line stats, it looks bad, but it's easy to forget. They would make plays 9 out of 10 times. It was just, and then they would get ripped for a 75-yard run by, whoever showed up out of the locker room, as Kevin said. It wasn't like it was completely broken. It was just that there were schematic issues that really put guys in stressed positions where it was basically one-on-one and they had to make a tackle. And so whether it was Tuff Borland, as Kirk said, coming off an injury, or, the rotation at free safety where they were having struggles with guys in space, it really was somewhat minor things that could be fixed. So it wasn't just like a talent deficient issue.
Kevin, for a lot of pressure being on the defense, there's also some pressure on the offense because they're breaking in a new quarterback. There's so much anticipation with Justin Fields going out there on Saturday. Do you think with Fields, there's always going to be pressure, especially from the Ohio State fan base, but I get the sense that maybe his spring game performance, fair or unfair, right or wrong, kind of tempered people's enthusiasm just a bit. Is that going to help maybe with him have a little bit more time to develop into whatever quarterback we think he can be, starting on Saturday?
I mean, I don't think the fans are patient for anybody. Or I mean, they never have been and they never will be. So I don't think it helps anything. I mean, I think that maybe when you sit there and you really, break it down and you look and say, all right, well, he didn't have the sharpest spring game, but you also have to remember, however many, a dozen, 15 guys were held out due to injury or off-season procedures that were done and whatnot. And then you split the roster in half and you take away his ability to run. We really didn't see Justin Fields over in the spring game. That was not, that was not set up in a position for Justin Fields to show off his talents. I mean, let's remember he's a lot more JT Barrett than he is Dwayne Haskins. I mean, he is a true dual threat type of quarterback. So, I don't know if there's a situation of where fans are going to really think about, well, when I saw him in April, he was this, and this. So I guess it's okay that he, airmailed KJ Hill on this ball, or he didn't work through his progression and just stared down Dobbins on a little throw into the flat or whatnot. I don't think fans are really going to think about that. They just, don't tell me about the labor. Just show me the baby.
Kirk, I think there's a lot of optimism for what we're hearing out of fall camp with the offensive line. Not only the depth, but potentially the production from the starters. We know Brandon Bowen is back, finally starting after a lot of injuries last year. Petit Frere is said to be playing really well. Harry Miller, true freshman, looks like he's going to be in the rotation. What are your expectations for this offensive line this year?
I mean, they should be physically dominant. I saw Thayer a month ago. He looks fantastic. His body's really peaking right now. I know he's had some back issues, but he looks great. Josh Myers reminds me a lot of Corey Lindsley a few years ago, a guy who was a little bit older, never started a game and stepped in and played really well. Obviously Wyatt, very heralded. And we have a unique situation depth-wise because we had Brandon Bowen start 2 years ago, and then he broke his leg. So I mean, he was playing great at guard next to Billy Price a couple of years ago, and now he's back, and I really emotionally I hope he has a great year just because the kid's been through so much and he's such a good kid, and I expect it to be a strength. I look forward to seeing how well Brandon holds up at tackle because he played great at guard. I think Thayer is one of the best left tackles in a absolutely loaded year for tackles in the Big Ten. And I'm just excited to see Jonah Jackson too. I mean, that was like getting a 5-star kid when you get a kid who was honorable mention All Big Ten, who's a 5th-year senior, who's played it. If you get all honorable mention anything on Rutgers' offense, which is like 150th out of 130 teams, like you literally, that's special. I'm just being facetious because Rutgers is the last 3 years I watched them on offense, and they're just so bad they shouldn't even be ranked with the 1A teams. So, but I'm excited for it. I think that that Jonah's going to be an upgrade over Malcolm. And hopefully, if Brandon can be at the same level as Isaiah Prince, who was all Big Ten last year, that'd be pretty solid for us up front.
Ross, there's been a lot of there have been some hints from Ryan Day, let's just put it that way, that they are going to try their best to protect Justin Fields. You heard Urban Meyer this week. He said, Fields supposedly is running a 4.38. He's like, that's Braxton Miller type of speed if that's the case. So they're really excited about his ability to make plays, but they're also cognizant of the fact that there's a big drop off from him to Gunnar Hoke or whoever would be taking his place if he gets hurt. So I'm curious, Ross, how much will Ohio State dial down the planned run game with Justin Fields and not only planned, but scrambles as well? Or do you think that despite what they're saying, they're still going to recognize his strengths and make sure he's making plays within the offense?
Yeah, it's going to be a part of the game. I mean, it would just be a waste of his ability and where he is relatively, I think, as a runner versus a passer right now in his development, to not run him. That said, I certainly think they would avoid not having him have to run 20 plus times a game like some Braxton Miller or JT Barrett did at times under Urban Meyer. I think the plan will probably be to continue to use him a big part in the read game with less quarterback design runs than maybe Urban Meyer would rely on. But I think it's gonna partially depend on how he's doing passing. At the end of the day, you have to win games, and so if they're not moving the ball down the field that way, and if they're getting outnumbered in the box, it's gonna by necessity be a big part of the game plan.
Kevin, I don't know if you have ordered your Ryan Day decoder ring just yet, but what have you been able to ascertain with him speaking on this subject as to, how much do you think he's sincere about, really trying to protect Fields?
I mean, when we talked to him earlier this week, somebody kind of asked a question along the lines of, well, when you guys are up all these points in a route, and are you going to pull Justin? Are you going to do this, that, or the other? And Ryan's like, we're going into every game like we got to win it in the fourth quarter. So I truly believe that, they are going to have to run him, and they need to get him ready for when they get into games that may be a little bit more appealing on the schedule. And I'm not taking anything away from FAU or Cincinnati or Indiana coming up in a couple weeks. But once we get to the end of the month and they have to travel to Lincoln to play Nebraska, they're going to need to really have Justin Fields out of the bubble wrap at that point. And you can't completely just coddle them up until that point and then say, here you go. Now you gotta do everything at that point. So, there is going to be a fine line there. I don't think we're going to see a ton of designed QB runs. I think we're going to see ones where, he's going to have the option to go. And then I think we're going to see times where maybe just he's not going to find anybody and he's just going to tuck it and go. But I don't think that we're going to see where Ohio State's going to get itself into a position of having to do the 20, 23, 26 Q runs that, that we'd seen in under some previous quarterbacks when the offense was really slogging down.
Kirk, I think is as much as important as the balance of run to pass with Fields and whether or not he's making plays. It's getting back, like we mentioned, the offensive line, but also getting back to that running game and being effective. And J.K. Dobbins has said this offseason, this fall, he knows he did not play well enough last year, and he wants to get back to being one of the best backs, if not the best back in the country. What did Dobbins not do last year to equal his freshman performance, and what do you expect from him going forward?
Well, I don't think that the line necessarily was as good as it'll be this year, and I think that JK was either banged up or something was off last year because he didn't seem as explosive as he did as a freshman, because I took him in the first round of my Yahoo fantasy draft and he ended up being behind Mike Weber for half the season, which wasn't great. But I think another kind of issue. It's not really an issue, but we were so good throwing the ball last year that when that becomes kind of your identity, and you're doing that more in practice, and you're doing more of that in the game, and I feel like there's a correlation between us being able to run the ball and being able to stop the run, because we couldn't really do either very well last year. And I think part of it was because we were kind of an air raid team last year, which is fine, because when you have Dwayne Haskins, you got to take advantage of his his ultra talented arm, which we've never seen anything like that guy in terms of throwing the ball. So I think that the thing honestly that I'm most excited to see on FAU is how dedicated is Ryan to having Justin pull the ball on a read option. Because they were showing it in the spring game, and obviously he was in a black shirt, but he was doing the fakes, but I think you got to call one where it's designed to pull it, just to prove that he will pull it, as opposed to just carrying out a fake on a regular tight zone play. So that's something that I'm excited to see, because he could take it around the corner, but if I'm playing defense, I want to make him pull it so I can get a shot on him. So I don't think we're going to get too many where he's just running free, because I think these guys are going to want to hit him and hit him early.
And Kirk also, what are you expecting from Ohio State's, pass protection? Because that was actually a big strength last year. It was crazy how well they kept Dwayne Haskins upright. And Ryan Day mentioned it. They were very, very good about, giving him time. Can they replicate that? Because they did such a great job last year. What are you expecting from that this year?
Well, I think Thayer, again, would be preseason All Big Ten if it wasn't such a spectacular year for Big Ten tackles. Iowa's got a couple good ones. Michigan has a good one. But it's gonna. I think Brandon is really gonna have to protect the right edge. Isaiah, for as much grief as he took in 2016, had an All Big Ten year. He looks like he's gonna make the Dolphins. Make the 53-man roster. And I told Thayer and Isaiah, I was like, you guys won the Michigan game. I know everyone's talking about Dwayne and the receivers, but you guys shut down Winovich, who's had a great preseason, and Rashawn Gary, who was a top 15 pick. And I think that's going to be the key. Is can we protect these guys? And last year, I thought the key to the season was Thayer Munford, because we had a young kid playing left tackle. We knew that we weren't going to be able to scramble around and save him if he couldn't pass protect, and he was nails all season. So we need to light a candle at church that his back and knee and ankle and everything else that's hurt on him stays good throughout the season, because I think that our talent on our O-line is better this year than it was last year, but we still got to see him perform.
Kevin, I'll wrap this up. I'll start with you. What are you expecting from Ohio State Saturday? Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a score prediction, but what kind of football team do you expect to see when they come out of the shoe at noon on Saturday?
Well, I mean, here on Friday we will have our staff predictions, so I'm not afraid to put my score out right now. I don't think we're going to see a game of where the offense is going to just go up and down the field. I think there'll be some growing pains. I think we'll see some drives that will be more along the lines of 8, 9, 10 play drives, 11, 12, instead of some of these quick hitters of where it was 3 and 3, and you're kicking the extra point at that point. I think the biggest thing we'll see is we'll see a much improved defense against a Florida Atlantic team that probably won't have a lot in the passing game and will be much more of a running threat. And I think Ohio State will do a good job of shutting them down with that. We're not going to see Justin Fields throw for 300 yards, but I think we're going to see him account for somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 touchdowns, be it 2 on the ground, 2 in the air, 3 in the air, 1 on the ground. I like Ohio State to cover, though, somewhere in the neighborhood of 42-10.
Ross, what are you expecting to see from Ohio State? A fired up bunch? What kind of offense do you expect? Do you expect an improved defense?
Yeah, Kevin kind of stole my thunder. I actually also expect the Ohio State defense to be ahead of the offense at this point. I think that it will be a defensive and led team with a heavy emphasis on the run game offensively, at least for the first 6 weeks of the season. I think the offense will look a bit more like what we had seen prior to Dwayne Haskins under Urban Meyer, a lot more emphasis on the read run game and design quarterback runs and short yardage. But I think it's going to be probably a little bit lower scoring than people maybe predict, but I think that people are going to be pleased with how the new Ohio State defense looks.
And Kirk, final thoughts for you. Do you agree with Ross on that? Do you think it'll be kind of a defense first and foremost early in the year for Ohio State as the offense feels its way out?
Well, I hope, because if we can't shut down Charlie Weiss Jr.'s kid as a coordinator, I don't know who we're going to shut down on our schedule. And he's like 24 years old, so I hope we can lock him down. But to me, it's like I just want to see our guys get back to playing good, sound defense, like we played for so many years. Because the thing about some of these guys from the NFL, and I'm not just picking on Shiano, but sometimes they get a little too cute. They try to out scheme everything instead of just playing good, solid gap sound defense. And it rears its ugly head at the worst possible ones, like against Iowa. We go man on 2 first-round tight ends instead of just playing like a simple cover 3 and covering these guys up. And I think that Greg Madison will get back to that. I've played against them, when they whooped their ass. He was the DC at Florida, and I've coached against them at Michigan in 11 and 12, and I know his defense really well. I look for him to be pretty exotic on third down. They like to do the stand-up guys a lot. They a lot of times they bring 7 guys across the line, and you got to predict who's going to drop and who's going to rush. So it'd be interesting to see if we unleash some of that, some of the stuff that he ran at Michigan. So, but I'm excited to see him. I had a good talk with him, and I think he's a great coach. So I'm excited. He's hopefully the lone voice at calling the defense.
Ohio State and Florida Atlantic kicking off noon on Saturday. That is a Fox televised game. Looking forward to it. I'm sure many of you have waited long enough. So Ohio State football is about ready to kick off. Kevin Noon, Ross Fulton, and Kirk Barton, you can hear them you can read their work on BuckeyeGrove.com, and you'll be able to hear many of them. Kevin will be with the interns in the Rapid Reaction podcast. You can hear the first one after Saturday's game and many more to come. And Ross and Kirk, of course, will be on here on the Unscripted Ohio podcast, breaking down and analyzing what happened with Ohio State football all season long. So looking forward to it. Guys, I really appreciate taking this time and can't wait to talk to all of you again.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
So ordinarily, this would be the Buckeye Beat segment, but we are throwing a little bit of curveball today, throwing you for a loop, changing things up. This is now, at least for today, this is going to be the Browns Beat, because I am privileged to introduce the new host of the Dog Days podcast, Chris Drew. Chris will be taking over covering the Browns with the Dog Days podcast here every Tuesday on the Unscripted Ohio Network. So we're turning the tables, talking to Chris, previewing the show, talking a little bit of Browns and maybe a little bit of Buckeyes at the time. But Chris, glad you can join the good guys here on the Unscripted Ohio Network.
I could not be excited. I am so excited to be joining the good guys, Kyle. I think I probably DM'd you or texted you every day. Like, just a reminder, it's Tuesday and it's 6 a.m. and I couldn't be more excited to be a part of this, the Unscripted Network. So this is awesome. I couldn't be more excited to host Dog Days, and I'm excited to ruffle some feathers. And for the first time in a long time, instead of being the laughing stock, the Browns have a rising stock. So I'm super excited to kind of drive this bus for the next 16, 19, 20 weeks.
So, Chris, this is an exciting time here for the network. We've got a lot going on with the new Dog Days podcast, and we've got Shane Larson with the Gridiron Game Time podcast, and of course, you can hear your Buckeyes as you normally do with the Unscripted Ohio podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Corey and Johnny with the Scarlet and Gray podcast. But before we get into Dog Days podcast and everything that you're going to be doing with the show and the Browns themselves, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, man, I don't want to keep you for a whole 2-hour segment, but I'm Chris Drew. I'm from Northeast Ohio. I've lived here for a long, long time. Love Northeast Ohio sports. Love the Buckeyes. That's probably kind of my first love. I started working for the radio station a couple years ago. They found me at a hospital, Kyle, and that is a quite the story. They found me at a hospital. They brought me on. And since then, I've been hosting 2 shows on WAKR. I host the Weekend Sports Talk during the football season. And then year-round, I host Drew's Views, which is kind of a magazine-style long-form show that I get to hear myself talk for 30 minutes at a time. So, and then I'm here. And I'm here because I love the Buckeyes. I love what you've done with the network. And now I have a great opportunity to kind of continue this and continue my Northeast Ohio love for sports and give you guys some Browns talk weekly.
Chris, I need to ask you, so This is an exciting time to be launching a Browns podcast. It's an exciting time for Browns fans in general. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of excitement. But, coming from a Browns family, growing up with a father that is a Browns fan and being around, I know that there's some guarded optimism, and maybe it's Ohio sports fans in general know, there's disaster lurking around the corner. So this is no exception. How many, in your experience, how many fans are sitting there, they're pumped up saying this is our year, and how many are just saying, I'm still a little worried about this. There's just something that's going to go wrong.
There's about 35% right now that are waiting for something to go wrong. I mean, when I go out, when I go to events, when I talk to people, you have your people. There's it's like a bell curve, Kyle. It's like you're what, 5 or 10% on the end. They think it's going to implode. The mass majority are like, okay, yeah, we're good. This is going to be a good year. And then there's the Super Bowl people. And then so I think it's about 30% of them say, you know what, something's going to go wrong. I think most people believe that this is going to be a 9-7 team at the worst and make the playoffs. But a lot of people are worried, and the worry kind of is about Freddie Kitchens. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, a first-year head coach, and they're kind of worried not about his play calling because they believe he's a great football mind, but they're a little bit concerned about how does he handle a locker room with all these personalities.
Chris, when I look at the Browns on paper, it feels like it's their year. You look at the AFC North, you've got the Pittsburgh Steelers that are aging out a little bit. Of course, they've lost Antonio Brown. They lost Le'Veon Bell. There's still some talent there on the offensive side of the ball for the Steelers, but it's not as explosive as it once was. And the defensive side of the ball, they're still a decent defense. They played better in the second half of last year, but they're not the Steelers defense of old. When you look at the Ravens, what is Lamar Jackson? We don't really know. He started off playing really well, kind of came down to earth late last year. We still don't know what he is. Cincinnati is a very young roster. There's a lot of holes there. There's a lot of unknowns with Cincinnati. They're probably being undersold maybe just a little bit, but I don't think they're a playoff team. So when you look at the division, this is, I think, the Browns to win on paper. What is it when you look at the Browns personnel, though? What is it you see? What do the Browns need to do personnel-wise to live up to the expectations, to live up to the potential and win this division?
Well, I think a lot of it is going to have to be with philosophy. I think Baker Mayfield and the staff kind of has the decision that they're going to have to make. Do they want Baker Mayfield to kind of be the gunslinger, or do they want him to be like Drew Brees? And I think that philosophy could kind of have a trickle-down effect on the whole team. For me personally, I don't love kind of the gunslinger mentality. I would rather my quarterback complete 60+% of his passes, throw very little picks, especially because of how good the defense is. And really, if this Browns team loses, it'll be for a couple reasons. A, they shoot themselves in the foot, whether that's ball security or whether that's penalties. Or B, they're not going to be able to rise up to getting everybody's best shot in the league. So I'm not really worried about, the roster is so deep and so complete that I'm not concerned about that at all. My issue is, for the first time in many, many years, the Browns are no longer being penciled in as a win. The Browns are going to get everybody's best shot. And I've said it for a long time. It is so, so hard to be the hunter when you're being hunted. So that's my only concern. But really, I really think that they'll have the talent to kind of out talent at least 4 wins this year. And that's a ton in the NFL. So on paper, they are the favorites, but they're going to get everybody's best shot. And they're going to get the Steelers' best shot twice a year. And I think the Steelers are being really undersold as a team. I think they're going to be solid. I think they're kind of going to have a prove it year a little bit. And that's kind of scary when you have a lot of veterans and a good head coach and a team that is used to winning, for them to have to feel like they have to prove it. But I'm not worried really about Baltimore, and I'm not really too worried about Cincinnati. Like you said, they're a couple years away, I believe. And I get confused when I watch Baltimore because it's like they're the Georgia Tech of the NFL, the old Georgia Tech in the NFL. So
I'm not trying to curse or jinx the Browns, so I'm going to knock on wood before I say this. But, so far, the Browns have really avoided injuries and the injury bug in fall camp. And so there's a lot of optimism there because there's a lot of depth on the Browns roster, and they have a lot of, playmaking guys on both sides of the ball. So really, the only issues that the Browns have had so far, it comes down to the suspension of Kareem Hunt, which let's be honest, they already knew going in that was going to be the case. They knew they'd be out without him for the first half of the season, and then the suspension to Antonio Callaway. But beyond that, they really have avoided the injuries. So, when I look at the Browns roster, we can really focus right now, I think, on personnel. And for me, the Browns defense maybe was a little underachieving early on in the year last year, and when Baker came in and began as the starting quarterback, they really rallied behind Baker on the offensive side of the ball. But I think with all that talent and playmaking on defense, we look at this Browns roster and I think there's something there to go with the offense to make this a complete football team.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think that this is going to be a really exciting bunch. I love, I'm also a Giants fan. That's kind of my guilty pleasure. I was a Giants fan. Went through a messy divorce this season. Still kind of going through it. But Odell Beckham Jr., if he can stay healthy, that's kind of one of the major keys, because I really don't think Jarvis is good enough to be a true number one. So you want to have Odell Beckham Jr. out there 13, 14 games this year, especially if you're looking at not just winning the division, but kind of trying to make a splash in the playoffs.
Chris, it's kind of interesting at receiver, especially with Antonio Callaway's suspension right now. The Browns are a little bit thin at wide receiver, and I don't think that they can afford any more injuries or suspensions at that position. So they tried to correct some of those depth issues by going out and signing Braxton Miller this past week. I want to know your thoughts on this Braxton Miller signing, and does he have a shot of making the 53-man roster when it comes out next week? And what are the Browns' long-term plans for Braxton Miller?
Well, I had a couple initial thoughts. One thing is, when they signed him, they went ahead and they cut Jalen Strong after a couple practices. So that shows me that I thought Jalen Strong had a really strong preseason. But the fact that they cut him kind of when Braxton kind of got to camp and kind of flashed a little bit, that was a little bit of a telltale sign to me. Also on the flip, leadership-wise, I think it's important to remember that Braxton was on an absolutely loaded college football team, one of the best college football teams talent-wise ever. And I think that might be kind of a good locker room zen to bring, like, hey, just because you're talented doesn't mean everything's going to be penciled in for you to win the whole thing. There's got to be a certain level of urgency and a certain level of leadership shared by everybody. Also, I think he will stick on the roster. But if he does get cut, I believe that he will be on the practice squad. And we may mention it, Lamar Jackson. I mean, Braxton Miller being on the practice squad, being scout team Lamar Jackson, I think is kind of a tailor-made role for him, because the Browns are going to have to face Lamar twice a year, every year for the foreseeable future. So I think that could be also a role for him if I'm looking at it. But I still do think he'll stick. I was unsure before, but the suspension of Callaway plus the cutting of Jalen Strong makes me think that he could have a shot on this roster.
The Browns on Thursday made a minor move, acquiring guard Wyatt Teller from Buffalo. Teller last year finished the last 9 games starting for the Bills. What was the thinking behind the Browns making this move on Thursday?
Well, with shorter quarterbacks, the one thing you want to do is build your offensive line from the guards out, because you don't want those arms up. You don't want any push in the interior, especially with shorter quarterbacks. And Wyatt Teller, I mean, 2018, he took 476 snaps, only allowed 2 quarterback hits, 6 quarterback hurries, and 8 pressures, and 0 sacks. So he did a good job, and those are PFF numbers. So he did a good job, and he didn't allow any sacks, and only 9 hurries and over 400 snaps. That is very, very impressive. And I think they feel like, with Baker, with the quick release, with these quick 2-step, 3-step drops, you want to get the ball out quickly so we can't have any interior pressure. And that was kind of something that they were able to pull off as kind of a bargain deal, because really the Bills were too offensive line heavy, and he was kind of becoming a cut candidate. So Dorsey recognized that and pulled the trigger, and that's only going to help, especially because they ended up trading away a couple offensive linemen this offseason when they acquired OBJ and some of the other deals.
We're speaking with Chris Drew here on the Unscripted Ohio podcast. He is the new host of the Dog Days podcast, covering and talking about the Cleveland Browns here on Unscripted Ohio. Chris, tell us what it is about the Dog Days podcast that people will find interesting. Why should they listen? What do you have planned for Dog Days going forward?
So I'm going to break it up into a couple different segments. It's going to be about a 20, 30-minute show, sometimes 40 minutes if it's loaded and there's a lot going on. But I'm going to kind of, give out my little awards. I'm going to break down a couple of the plays and break down kind of the overall scope of the NFL and what it has to do with the Browns. So every show I'm going to start kind of with a wrap up of the game, what I saw, what I liked, what I didn't see, what I would have liked to see. And then I'm going to kind of cut to some players of the game, some moments of the game, because I think that in football there's about 6 to 8 plays every game that are so defining, especially in the NFL when everybody is so talented and every score is so tight knit. And then I'm gonna, kind of end the show with a preview and what to expect, and then kind of a fantasy player of the week, a Browns fantasy player of the week, that if you do have a Cleveland Brown on your team, who to start, who to bench, and what you're looking at. So that's what I'm looking at right now, Kyle. I'm super, super excited. And I really just can't wait. Like, if you told me to record a show right now, Kyle, I would go record a show right now because that's how pumped I am about Browns football.
Well, Chris, I'm not going to make you do that because we're a day away from the debut of Ohio State football for the 2019 season.
Yes.
And I know you have been counting down the days until you're able to see Justin Fields in his official debut. We saw a glimpse of him in the spring, but it was just a glimpse. It was just a spring game, but it starts for real on Saturday. I know you're ready to see Fields in the scarlet and gray.
Oh, Kyle, I am so ready. The Buckeyes, I love the Browns. I love the NFL, but the Buckeyes have always been my first love. A little secret, my mom went to Michigan. So somehow we ended up back in Ohio, and my uncle scooped in and rescued me from 10 years of misery and made me an Ohio State fan, started getting me all the Ohio State gear. And so every year I just, I love all the Michigan talk, the Michigan excitement, and I love to kind of see how that unfolds every year. And I am so excited to see Justin Fields. And you forgot to mention my other guy, Garrett Wilson. I love Garrett Wilson. So, Kyle, I'm ready. I'm ready to put my flannels on and go around the neighborhood screaming OH and go to church and see my mom and yell OH again. So I'm ready.
And Chris, I've got to take a little bit of credit for getting you hyped up on Garrett Wilson.
Oh, take all credit.
Remember, I came on the radio with you that one time, and I told you, I said, Garrett Wilson is the truth. You're going to see it real soon.
Yeah, and then, I started reading and I started watching. I mean, I heard Ryan Day tell the story about he was at a Lake Travis practice, and he looked over and he saw a wide receiver blow a corner off the line and drive him 15 yards out of bounds into a tree and start screaming at him. And it's like, that's the Garrett Wilson. And then, the spring game, he's mossing kids. You threw some comparisons out there. I won't mention them now, but I'm so excited. I'm so excited. It's insane.
Yeah, I remember you did a double take when I made those comparisons.
Yeah, no, not at all. And then I watched the All-American game, and he mossed like 2 kids, like 2 5-star corners. And then you throw on the spring game, and he's mossing Ohio State corners and making it look easy. And he's not that tall, Kyle. I'm ready. I'm glad. I was supposed to be in Orlando this weekend, but I'm gonna be home in Akron watching my Buckeyes, and I'm so ready.
Well, Chris, I think you said it best right there for everybody. People are amped. They're ready to go. They can't wait for the start of the 2019 Ohio State football season, which kicks off tomorrow. Ohio State against Florida Atlantic. That's a nationally televised game on Fox. The Fighting Lane Kiffins are coming to town. Can't wait to see that. But, Chris, before we let you go, give us your Twitter account. Make sure you tell everybody where they can follow you, Buckeye fans and, of course, Browns fans. Eager to listen to the Dog Days podcast.
Oh, yep. So you can follow me on Twitter at _Chris_Drew. I tweet out every once in a while. I pretend like I know a lot, and I'm just kidding. I do know a decent amount. I'm trying to get, I'm trying to avoid being bullied by Corey. So I don't know how vocal I'll be quite yet. But yeah, follow me on there. I will have everything posted. I'll have little clips posted, and I will keep you updated with this Browns season and the podcast Dog Days. So.
Well, I need to give you a heads up. It's actually Johnny is the one you need to worry about. Corey will get you if you're napping. If you're not paying any attention, Corey will get you. But Johnny is the original prankster. He's the one you need to worry about.
Okay, yeah, I'm on the lookout for Johnny as well. If you're listening, Johnny, truce, please, maybe.
Ohio State kicking off its 2019 college football season tomorrow at noon. That is on Fox against Florida Atlantic. We'll be back on the Unscripted Ohio podcast on Monday to talk about everything that happened. Okay, maybe not everything, but close enough. Don't forget also the debut of the Dog Days podcast on Tuesday. Chris Drew will preview the season opener of the Browns coming up next weekend. Of course, I'll be back on Wednesday and Friday as well. Corey and Johnny will be back at you with the Scarlet and Gray podcast on Tuesday and Thursday. And my man Shane Larson with the second edition of the Gridiron Game Time. That is coming up next Thursday. Catch me on Twitter, everybody. I'm at KYLam8. You can catch the show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com. And all of our podcasts here on the Unscripted Ohio Network, you can find and follow by subscribing to Unscripted Ohio on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. That's going to do it for me. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll be back on Monday.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.